The mall corridor stretched before Evelyn like a hallway of judgment. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting in a sickly glow that made the polished floor look like ice. She clutched her worn leather purse against her chest, her knuckles white against the faded brown leather. The automatic doors had barely closed behind her when she heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, closing in like a storm she couldn't outrun. "Stop right there." The voice was sharp, female, dripping with the kind of authority that came from years of being listened to. Evelyn froze mid-step, her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned slowly, already knowing what she would see. A woman in her 40s, blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, designer blazer, and heels that clicked against the tile like a countdown. Behind her, a security guard in a too-tight uniforms stood with his arms crossed, his eyes already fixed on Evelyn, like she was guilty of something. "Ma'am," Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Is there a problem?" The woman, her nag, read Meredith Crane. Store manager, stepped closer, her lips pressed into thin line of barely concealed satisfaction. "You know exactly what the problem is. The diamond pendant from our display case. It's missing." Evelyn's mouth went dry. I didn't take anything. I just came in to look at the watches. "A gift for my grandson's graduation." Meredith's laugh was cold, practiced. "Your grandson, of course. And how exactly were you planning to pay for a watch that costs more than you make in 3 months? She gestured to the security guard, who stepped forward, his hand already resting on his radio. "Check her bag, please." "I didn't check her bag." The guard grabbed Evelyn's purse before she could protest, yanking it from her grip with rough efficiency. He dumped the contents onto a nearby bench, her wallet, her reading glasses, her pressure medication, her blood pressure medication, a small Bible with a cracked leather cover, and a grocery receipt from yesterday's shopping trip. No diamond pendant, no jewelry of any kind. Meredith's face flickered with something disappointment before she recovered. "Check her coat pockets." "This is ridiculous," Evelyn whispered. But she raised her arms anyway, letting the guard pat her down with hands that lingered too long, that pressed too hard. He found nothing. Meredith's smile returned sharper now. "Then you wouldn't mind coming with us to the security office? We have cameras that need reviewing." The guard's hand closed around Evelyn's arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. She looked around the mall carer, hoping someone would see, would speak up, would do something. But the shoppers kept their eyes down, their phones pressed to their ears, their children pulled closer as le pas they pan. No one met her gaze. No one wanted to see. "You remaking a mistake," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but steady. "I didn't take anything. I'm 72 years old. I've never stolen a thing in my life." "You people always say that." Meredith's voice was ice, but the evidence does to lie. Evelyn's knees buckled as the guard pulled her forward, but she forced hers to walk. She thought of her grandson, Marcus, waiting at home with his acceptance letter to Georgia Tech, the first in their family to go to college. She thought of the watch she had saved for months to buy, the one she had seen in the wind in Lovell and fallen in love with, because it reminded her of the one his father had worn before he passed. She thought of the dinner she had planned for tonight, the pot roast simmering in the slow cooker, the cake she had baked from scratch. None of that mattered now. What mattered was surviving this. What mattered was not letting them see her break. The security office was small, windowless, smelled like stale coffee and fear. Evelyn sat in a plastic chair while the guard stood by the door, his arms crossed, his eyes never leaving her. Meredith stood at the desk, tapping at a keyboard, pulling up footage on a monitor that Evelyn couldn't see. "Let me explain how this works," Meredith said without turning around. "We have you on camera near the display case. We have you lingering. We have you looking around like someone who knows they're redoing something wrong. And we have a missing pendant worth $4,000. I didn't take it. Will you see what the police have to say about that?" Evelyn closed her eyes. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the pot roast. She thought about the cake. She thought about the watch she would never buy, the grandson she might never see graduate, the life she had built with her bare hands that was now crumbling. Because a woman in a designer blazer had decided she looked like a thief. The door opened. A man in a police uniform stepped in, his expression bored, his hand resting on his belt. He looked at Evelyn the way you look at a stain on the carpet, something to be dealt with, then forgotten. "Yes, I'm Officer Decker. You under arrest for suspicion of grand larceny." He pulled out handcuffs. The metal glinted under the fluorescent lights. Evelyn extended her wrist without being asked. She had learned long ago that fighting only made things worse. The cold metal bit into Evelyn's wrists as Officer Decker cinched the handcuffs tight. Too tight. She winced but said nothing. Complaining would only make him tighten them more. She had learned that lesson decades ago, in a different room, with different hands, but the same metal bite. "Stand up, slow." Evelyn rose, her knees popping, her shoulders aching from the angle of her arms. Decker grabbed her elbow and guided her out of security office, back in the mall corridor. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter now, harsher, illuminating every flaw, every wrinkle, every sign of age and poverty that marked her as someone who didn't belong. The crowd had grown. Shoppers pressed against the storefronts, their phones raised, their faces hungry for a spectacle. Evelyn kept her eyes fixed on the floor, watching her own sensible shoes shuffle across the polished tile. She counted the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was the only way to keep from crying. "Make a hole," Decker barked, and the crowd parted like water around a stone. Evelyn caught a glimpse of faces as she passed. A young mother pulling her toddler closer, a teenager smirking behind his phone, an elder white man in an expensive suit shaking his head with what looked like disappointment. None of them knew her. None of them asked for her side. They had already decided, based on the handcuffs and the uniform and the color of her skin, that she was guilty. "You people always say that." Meredith's words echoed in Evelyn's mind, sharper than the handcuffs, colder than the metal. "You people." 3 words that carried the weight of centuries. 3 words that reduced her entire existence to a category, a target, a stereotype, a target. They passed the jewelry store where the whole nightmare had started. Through the glass, Evelyn could see the display case where she had stood, hers clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the watch she had dreamed of giving Marcus. She had asked to see it. The saleswoman had brought it out with obvious reluctance, placed it on a velvet cloth, as if Evelyn's hands might soil it. She had held it, turned it over, felt the weight of it in her palm. Then she had handed it back and walked away. That was the moment. That was when the pendant had supposedly gone missing. But Evelyn knew the truth. She had seen the saleswoman's eyes flick toward the security camera when she thought no one was watching. She had noticed the way Meredith had appeared at the counter almost immediately after Evelyn left. Her expression too eager, too ready. This was a mistake. This was a setup. "Where are you taking me?" "County holding." "You see a magistrate in the morning?" "In the morning? But I haven't done anything wrong. I have medication I need to take. I have a grandson waiting for me at home." Decker didn't answer. He just kept walking, his grip firm, his pace steady. Evelyn stumbled to keep up, her arthritis screaming with each step. The handcuffs bit deeper. The crowd pressed closer. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered the same thing her mother had told her years ago. "The world is not kind to people like us, baby." But you keep walking anyway. They reached the exit. The automatic door slid open, letting in a blast of cold air that made Evelyn shiver. A police cruiser sat at the curb, its lights off, its back door open like a mouth waiting to swallow her. Decker guided her toward it, one on her head to duck her into the back seat. The vinyl was cold against her legs. The cage between the front and back seats gleamed with the same metallic sheen as the handcuffs. The door slammed shut, and the world went quiet. Evelyn leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the pot roast. She thought about the cake. She thought about the watch she would never buy. The graduation she might miss. The life she had built with her bare hands that was now slipping away. Because a woman in a designer blazer had looked at her and seen a thief. But she also thought about the twins she had raised, the boys who had grown into men who wore uniforms of their own. And she prayed fiercely, silently, desperately that they would come home in time. The holding cell was a cage of concrete and fluorescent light. Evelyn sat on a metal bench bolted to the wall, her hands now free but her wrist still marked with red crescents where the cuffs had bitten. She rubbed them absently, staring at the gray door across from her set. The air like bleach sweat and something odd metallic she couldn't name. 3 other women shared the cell. A young woman with tear-streaked makeup sat in the corner, hugging her knees. Another, older, with graying braids and a tired face, sat across from Evelyn, watching her with quiet sympathy. The third paced like a caged animal, muttering under her breath. "You okay, sweetheart?" the woman with braids asked. Evelyn looked up, surprised by the kindness. "I don't know. I think I am still in shock. They get you on something you didn't do. How did you know?" The woman smiled, bitter and knowing. "Because that's how it works in here. The guilty ones always have a story ready. The innocent ones just sit there looking lost." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Evelyn Carter, I'm M. Dolores. Been in here 3 times. Never did a thing wrong, any of them. But the system don't care about what's true. It cares about what's easy." Evelyn felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. "I have a grandson. He's waiting for me at home. His graduation is next week." Dolores nodded slowly. "Then you hold on to that. You hold on to his face, his voice, the sound of his laugh. That's what gets you through the night in a place like this." The young woman in the corner let out a sob. Dolores turned to her, her voice softening. "You too, baby. Whatever they got you for, you more than that. Don't let this place convince you otherwise." Evelyn closed her eyes. She thought about Marcus at 5 years old, running through her kitchen with flour on his nose. She thought about him at 10, building a model rocket in her living room, his tongue sticking out in concentration. She thought about him at 17, holding up his acceptance letter with tears streaming down his face. "Grandma, I did it. I got in." She thought about the watch, the one she had saved for months to buy, the one she had seen in the window and fallen in love with because it reminded her of the one his father had worn, the one she would never give him now because a woman in a designer blazer had decided she looked like a thief. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, keys jangled, the gray door swung open, and a guard stepped in. "Carter, you have visitors." Evelyn's heart lurched. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and followed the guard out of the cell. The corridor stretched before her, lined with more doors, more cages, more fluorescent light. She walked past them all, her mind racing. Visitors, who would come for her at this hour? Marcus was hours away at school. Her neighbors didn't know she was here. The only people who might have heard. The guard stopped at a small room with a glass partition. On the other side stood 2 men in military dress uniforms. Their backs were straight. Their faces were carved from stone, and their eyes, when they saw her, filled with a fury so intense it made the air between them crackle. Isaiah and Josiah, her boys, they had come home. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled when she saw them. Isaiah's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. Josiah's eyes were wet, but he blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. They looked exactly as they had in every photograph she kept on her mantle, strong, proud, unbreakable. But she could see the cracks beneath the surface. She could see the fear they were trying to hide. The guard guided her to the chair on her side of the glass partition. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling, as she reached for the phone mounted on the wall. On the other side, Isaiah grabbed his phone first. "Mama," his voice cracked on the word. "Mama, we here, we going to get you out." Evelyn shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, how did you find me?" "Marcus called us. He said you didn't come home. He said your phone went straight to voicemail. We called the hospitals, the police stations, every jail in the county." Isaiah's voice hardened. "It took us 4 hours to find you. 4 hours, Mama. They arrested me for stealing a diamond pendant from a jewelry store. I didn't take it. Isaiah, I swear to you, I didn't take anything. We know." Josiah's voice came through the speaker, rough with emotion. "We know you didn't do it. You've never stolen a thing in your life. The manager, her name is Meredith Crane, she said she saw me on camera. She said I put in my pocket, but I didn't. I just looked at a watch for Marcus. I hand it back. I walked away, and then they were dragging me to the security office." Isaiah exchanged a look with his brother. Something passed between them, silent and heavy. When he spoke again, his voice was low, controlled, dangerous. "Mama, we going to need you to tell us everything. Every detail. What time you got to mall, what you wore, what you said to the saleswoman. What the manager said to you? Everything. Evelyn nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I got there around 11. I wanted to beat the lunch crowd. I was wearing my blue cardigan and my floral dress. The one I saved for church. The one with the deep pockets, Josiah said softly. Did anyone touch you? Search you? Put anything in your pockets? Evelyn's breath caught. She remembered the moment in the security office, when the guard had patted her down. She remembered the way Meredith had hovered close, her hands brushing against Evelyn's coat. The way Meredith's strains had lingered near her pocket. The way Meredith's fingers had lingered near her pocket. Evelyn paused, the realization dawning slowly. She was close to me, in the security office. She kept touching my coat. I thought she was just being thorough. But what if she planted it? Isaiah finished. She planted the pendant on you, then pulled it out to make it look like you had it all along. As blood ran cold. But why? I've never done anything to that woman. I don't even know her. You don't have to know her, Mama. Josiah's voice was bitter. You just have to look like the kind of person she thinks deserves to be humiliated. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Evelyn looked down at her hands, at the red marks on her wrists, at the trembling fingers that had worked so hard for so long. She thought about Meredith's cold smile, the practiced way she had played the victim, the casual cruelty of her words. You people, Isaiah leaned closer to the glass. Listen to me, Mama. We not leaving this city until you free. We not going back to base. We not going anywhere. We going to find out who this woman is, why she did this. And we going to make sure she never does it again. But your careers don't matter. Josiah's voice was fierce. Nothing matter more than you. Nothing. Evelyn pressed her hand against the glass. Her boys pressed theirs against the other side. 3 palms, separated by inches of reinforced glass, but connected by something no jail cell could contain. The twins spent the next 3 hours in the parking lot of the county holding facility, working phones and laptops from the back of a rented SUV. Isaiah made calls to a military legal liaison, a civil rights attorney he knew from veterans advocacy work, and the base commander to request emergency leave. Josiah scourged some media, pulling up every post tag with the mall's name, searching for any footage of the arrest. It was Josiah who found it first. A shaky phone video, uploaded to a local community Facebook page, had already gathered 200 shares. The timestamp matched the time of Evelyn's arrest. The angle showed the mall corridor from the food court, capturing the moment Officer Decker had marched Evelyn past the crowd in handcuffs. Josiah watched it once, twice. Isaiah, he said, his voice tight. Come look at this. Isaiah leaned over his brother's shoulder. The video played again. Evelyn's face, pale and terrified as she shuffled past the onlookers. The officer's grip on her arm, unnecessarily tight. And then, in the background, a figure stepping out of the jewelry store, watching with crossed arms and a satisfied smile. Meredith Crane. But it wasn't just her presence that caught Josiah's attention. It was the way she was holding her phone, not recording, not calling anyone, just holding it, her thumb moving across the screen like she was typing a message. Her lips were moving too, forming words that the video couldn't capture. She's texting someone, Josiah said, right after the arrest. Look at her face. She's not worried. She's not upset. She's triumphant, Isaiah finished. She looks like she just won something. Isaiah pulled out his own phone and dialed the attorney they had contacted earlier. Celeste, we have something you need to see, a video of the arrest. And I think we have evidence that the store manager was coordinated with someone before the arrest even happened. Celeste Monroe arrived at the SUV 40 minutes later. She was sharp-faced, silver-streaked, and moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent 10 battles in fighting Dan in courtrooms. She watched the video twice, then pulled up the mall's directory on her tablet. The jewelry store is called Crane Co. Fine jewelry, she said, owned by Meredith Crane's family for 3 generations. Her father, Harold Crane, was a city councilman for 12 years. He's still well connected. Connected who? Josiah asked. Celeste's finger traced a line on her tablet. To district attorney's office, to the police union, and to a real estate development firm that has been trying to buy up the mall's property for the last 2 years. Isaiah's eyes narrowed. What does a jewelry store have to do with real estate? The mall's ownership group has been fighting off a hostile takeover from that development firm. If the mall's reputation suffers enough, if it becomes known as a place where elder women are falsely arrested and humiliated, the owners might be forced to sell at a discount. Josiah leaned back, his mind racing. So Meredith Crane is just a racist store manager with a grudge. She is a pawn in a larger game. Or a willing participant, Celeste said. Either way, your mother walked in the middle of a war she didn't know existed. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Then we make sure she walks out of it. The next morning, Evelyn was led into a small conference room inside the holding facility. The handcuffs were gone, replaced by the same orange jumpsuit that had become her second skin. She sat at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her, waiting. The door opened, and Celeste Monroe walked in, followed by Isaiah and Josiah. The twins looked like they had slept, their uniform rumpled, their eyes shadowed. But there was a fire in them that Evelyn hadn't seen since they were boys, fighting bullies in the schoolyard. Isaiah sat down across from her, his voice gentle but urgent. We have a plan. A plan for what? To get you out of here. To clear your name. To make sure Meredith Crane never does this to anyone else. Evelyn shook her head slowly. Baby, I've been in here for almost 24 hours. I've had time to think. Maybe it's easier if I just know. Josiah's voice was sharp. No, Mama, you don't get to give up. Not after everything you've taught us. Josiah, she taught us to stand up. Isaiah interrupted, his eyes locked on hers. She taught us that right is right, no matter who says different. You think we learned that from a book? We learned it from watching you. Every time you worked double shifts. Every time you went hungry so we could eat. Every time you stood in front of us and told us we were worth something, even when the world said we weren't. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. That was different. That was for you. This is for you, Mama. Josiah reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Let us fight for you the way you fought for us. Celeste cleared her throat, pulling a folder from her briefcase. We gathered evidence. The video from the food court, witness statements from other shoppers who saw what happened. And we filed a motion to have the charges dismissed based on lack of probable cause. Lack of probable cause. The security footage from the jewelry store conveniently malfunctioned during the time of the alleged theft. But the mall's exterior cameras show you entering the store empty-handed and leaving without anything in your hands. There's no evidence that you ever possessed the pendant. Evelyn's heart lifted, just a little. So they have to let me go? Not yet. The district attorney is dragging his feet. He is connected to Harold Crane, Meredith's father. He is waiting to see if the pressure will die down. Then we apply more pressure, Isaiah said. He pulled out his phone and showed Evelyn the screen. The video of her arrest had spread far beyond the local Facebook page. It was now on news sites, shared thousands of times, with comments pouring in from across the country. People are watching, Mama, Josiah said, and when people watch, things change. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Evelyn sat in the county courthouse, wearing the same blue cardigan and floor dress she had worn to the mall. Celeste had fought to have her released on her own recognizance, arguing that a 72-year-old woman with no criminal record and strong community ties posed no flight risk. The judge had agreed, but only after the district attorney had exhausted every delay tactic. Isaiah and Josiah flanked her in the front row, their dress uniform crisp, their faces unreadable. Behind them, the pews were packed with supporters. Tanya Reese sat with her daughter, Keisha, clutching a small sign that read Justice for Mama Evie. Walter Briggs sat 3 rows back, his veteran's cap in his hands. Marisol Vega sat near the exit, her eyes darting nervously, but her chin held high. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Morrison, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, took the bench. She looked over the courtroom with the weary patience of someone who had seen every kind of human failure and learned not to be surprised by any I'm. Counselor Monroe, you have a motion to dismiss? Celeste rose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Yes, Your Honor. We move to dismiss all charges against Mrs. Evelyn Carter on the grounds of insufficient evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. The district attorney, a portly man named Strickland, stood quickly. Your Honor, the state has ample evidence. The defendant was found in possession of stolen merchandise, allegedly stolen. Celeste interrupted. And the only evidence of that possession comes from the word of a store manager whose own security footage conveniently malfunctioned during the time of the alleged crime. Judge Morrison SI's fic to Strickland. Mr. Strickland, what is the state explanation for the missing footage? Strickland shifted his weight. Technical difficulties, Your Honor. The Store S system experienced a temporary outage. A temporary outage that lasted exactly 11 minutes. Celeste said, her voice sharp. The same 11 minutes during which Mrs. Carter was in the store. The same 11 minutes during which the store manager claims the theft occurred. Coincidence, Strickland muttered. Coincidence, Celeste repeated, turning to face the gallery. Let me show you what else is coincidence. She pressed a button on a small remote, and a screen lowered from the ceiling. The video from the food court played, showing Evelyn being led away in handcuffs while Meredith Crane stood in the background, her phone in her hand. Notice the timestamp, Celeste said. This video was uploaded to Facebook at 1:47 a.m. The arrest occurred at 1:38 a.m. That means Meredith Crane had already contacted someone outside the mall before the arrest was even complete. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Do you have evidence of who she contacted? Celeste pulled out a second piece of evidence. Phone records, Your Honor, obtained through a subpoena at 1:39 a.m. 1 minute after the arrest, Meredith Crane placed a call to Harold Crane, her father and former city councilman. The call lasted 4 minutes. At 1:43 a.m., Harold Crane placed a call to District Attorney Strickland S. office. The courtroom went silent. Strickland S. face turned a shade of red that matched his tie. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed. Mr. Strickland, did you receive a call from Harold Crane regarding this case? Strickland's mouth opened and closed. I may have taken a call from a concerned citizen, Your Honor. That's not unusual. A concerned citizen whose daughter had just falsely accused an elder woman of a crime she didn't commit. The state has not presented a single piece of credible evidence. Celeste interrupted. No footage, no witnesses, no forensic evidence. The only thing the state has is the word of a woman who called her father the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. And that father called the district attorney before the ink was dry on the arrest report. Judge Morrison turned to Strickland. Mr. Strickland, I'm going to ask you one time. Did Harold Crane ask you ensure that charges were filed against Mrs. Carter? Strickland's face crumpled. Your Honor, I answered the question. Yes. Strickland whispered. He said the family had been having trouble with shoplifters. He said they needed to make an example. Judge Morrison's face hardened. She turned to the bailiff. Clear the courtroom. Everyone except the parties and counsel. We're going to have a very long conversation about what just happened here. Evelyn stepped out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of blooming magnolias from the trees lining the street. She blinked against the brightness, her hand shielding her eyes. And for a moment she just stood there, letting the light wash over her. Isaiah and Josiah flanked her, their uniforms pristine, their shoulders squared. Behind them, the courtroom doors swung open, and the crowd of supporters spilled out on the steps. Tanya reached her first, pulling Evelyn into a fierce hug that smelled like fried chicken and hope. Walter Briggs shook Isaiah's hand with a grip that belied his age. Marisol stood at the edge of the crowd, crying openly, her hands pressed to her mouth. Celeste emerged last, her briefcase in one hand, her phone in the other. She walked over to Evelyn and smiled. It's over. All charges dismissed. And Strickland is facing a disciplinary hearing for his role in the cover-up. Evelyn nodded slowly. She looked at her hands, still trembling, still marked with the memory of handcuffs. Then she looked up at her sons. Take me home, she said quietly. The drive back to her small house was quiet. The streets of her neighborhood looked the same porches, the same trees, the same children playing on the sidewalks. But everything felt different. She felt different. When they pulled her on the front steps, he saw Marcus sitting on the front steps, his acceptance letter clutched in his hands. He stood up when he saw the car, his face breaking into a smile that reminded her of his father. Grandma, he said, his voice cracking. Evelyn got out of the car and walked toward him. She didn't speak. She just opened her arms, and he fell in them, and he fell in them, and they stood there in the afternoon light holding each other. Later that evening, after the pot roast had been eaten and the cake had been cut, Evelyn sat on her porch, her sons on either side of her. Marcus was inside, doing dishes, humming a tune she had taught him when he was 5. "Mama," Isaiah said softly, "what are you thinking about?" Evelyn looked out at the street, at the neighbors walking their dogs, at the children riding their bikes, at the world going on as if nothing had changed. "I am thinking about that woman," she said, "Meredith Crane. I am thinking about how much anger it must take to do what she did." Josiah shook his head. "She does deserve your pity. Maybe not, but I am not giving it for her. I am giving it for all the women like me who never had sons to come find them, who never had a lawyer to fight for them, who never had a crowd to stand behind them." She turned to look at her sons, her eyes shining. "You gave me something I never had before, a voice that couldn't be silenced, and now I am going to use it." If you enjoyed this story, leave a like to support this channel and subscribe, so you never miss the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 more stories of justice and dignity just for you. Have a blessed day.